The park looks peaceful at night, but the silence here has a history most people don't want to remember. Nothing supernatural happened here, and that's exactly what makes it terrifying. I've walked these paths alone after dark, and what I saw, it's nothing like the daytime beauty. Every shadow feels alive, every sound makes your heart race. Tonight, I'll take you inside Central Park's darkest corners, where real stories hide, some shocking, some terrifying, all true. You won't believe your eyes. If you want to uncover more real and spine-chilling stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join the adventure. 1 Central Park. I still remember the first time I stayed inside Central Park after sunset. It was late autumn. The air was cold, and the trees around the ramble looked darker than they should have. During the day, the park feels alive, tourists, runners, music, laughter. But that night, it felt different. The city noise faded, and every small sound started to matter. I wasn't there to chase ghosts. I was there because I wanted to understand something real, the park's dark history. Most people don't realize that in the 1970s and early 1980s Central Park had a serious crime problem. Robberies were common. Assaults were reported often. Locals used to warn each other not to walk there after dark. Back then, the park's beauty disappeared at night. It became unpredictable. As I walked deeper toward the ramble, I kept thinking about the 1989 case that changed everything, the Central Park jogger case. A young woman was brutally attacked while running at night. The crime shocked the entire country. News channels covered it non-stop. Parents stopped letting their kids go near the park alone. For years, people associated Central Park with fear. Standing there, I tried to imagine how the park must have felt that night in 1989. The same trees. The same paths. The same darkness. It gave me chills knowing this wasn't some urban legend. It actually happened. Even in 2016, there was another tragic incident in the park. A woman was murdered near one of the popular jogging areas. By that time, crime in the park had dropped massively compared to the past. New York had changed. The park had changed. But that case reminded everyone that darkness still exists, even in famous places. As I sat on a bench, I noticed how isolated certain areas still feel after sunset. The lights don't reach everywhere. Some paths are quiet and narrow. When the wind moves through the trees, it sounds like footsteps behind you. I caught myself turning around more than once. Nothing supernatural happened to me that night. No shadow figures. No whispers. But what made it unsettling was knowing the history was real. The fear wasn't coming from imagination, it was coming from documented events. When I finally walked out toward the brighter streets of Manhattan, I understood something clearly. Central Park is not haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by memory. And sometimes, that's even more disturbing. 2 Prospect Park. It was near the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. During the day, it's one of the most peaceful places in Manhattan. Runners move in circles. Tourists take photos. The skyline reflects beautifully on the water. But that night, it felt like a different world. The wind was stronger than usual. The surface of the reservoir was shaking, and the lights from nearby buildings looked broken in the water. I remember checking my phone. It was past 10:30 p.m. Not too late for New York, but late enough for the park to feel empty. As I walked, I kept thinking about a case from 2016. A woman named Karina Vitrano went for a run near the park area along the border of Queens. She was attacked and murdered during her evening jog. The crime shocked the city again. Even though it didn't happen deep inside Central Park itself, it reopened old fears about running alone near large parks after sunset. That night, every jogger I saw made me uneasy. Not because of them, but because I knew how quickly a normal evening run can turn into something tragic. I slowed down near a darker stretch of the path. There were fewer lights there. I could hear my own footsteps clearly. Then I heard something else. Another set of steps behind me. I turned quickly. It was just a man jogging, wearing headphones. He passed me without even looking up. But my heart was beating fast. For a few seconds, my mind had already created a worst-case scenario. That's what this place does after sunset. It makes your thoughts louder. I sat on a bench facing the water and tried to calm down. I reminded myself that crime rates in Central Park today are far lower than they were decades ago. The city has changed. Security has improved. Patrols are more common. Statistically, it's much safer now. But safety doesn't erase memory. In the 1970s, this park was known for muggings and violent attacks. People truly feared walking here at night. The reputation was real, built on real incidents reported again and again. As the wind picked up again, I looked across the dark water and thought about how places can carry history silently. No warning signs. No visible scars. Just stories. When I finally stood up to leave, I felt something strange, not fear exactly, but respect. Respect for the fact that behind the beauty of Central Park, there are real events that shaped how people see it. Nothing supernatural happened that night. But the tension was real. The history was real. And the feeling of being watched in the dark, that was real too. 3 Van Cortlandt Park. It was close to 11 p.m. The fountain that looked so beautiful in the daytime felt completely different under artificial lights. The steps were almost empty. A couple sat far away, talking quietly. Beyond them, the park stretched into darkness. I had been reading about what Central Park was like in the 1970s. Back then, the city itself was struggling. Crime rates were high across New York. Inside the park, muggings and violent assaults were common enough that locals warned visitors to stay away after dark. Newspapers at the time described it as dangerous at night. That wasn't a myth. It was documented reality. As I walked down the terrace steps, I tried to imagine what it must have felt like during those years. No bright skyline glow like today. Fewer patrols. Less security. Just long shadows and uncertainty. I moved toward a quieter pathway near the lake. The lights didn't fully reach that area. My footsteps echoed slightly against the stone. That's when I started thinking about how the park's reputation was built, not from one single case, but from repeated incidents over time. Robberies. Attacks. People who entered after sunset and regretted it. Suddenly, I heard raised voices. 2 men were arguing near the path. It wasn't violent, but it was tense. I couldn't hear the words clearly, only the tone. For a moment, my mind jumped straight to those old headlines I had read. My body reacted before logic did. My shoulders tightened. My breathing slowed. They eventually walked in opposite directions. Nothing happened. But the spike of fear stayed with me. I realized something important right there. The park itself isn't evil. It's not cursed. But when you stand in a place where real violence once happened, your brain fills the silence with history. And history can feel like a presence. As I continued walking, I passed a small plaque dedicated to someone's memory. I stopped and stared at it longer than I expected. I don't even remember the name now. But seeing a physical reminder that real lives were affected inside this park made everything heavier. The trees moved slightly in the wind. The city lights shimmered through the branches. It looked peaceful. Almost too peaceful. When I finally exited onto a brighter street, I turned back once. Central Park looked calm, almost innocent. Tourists tomorrow would take photos here. Kids would run through the same paths. But after dark, when it gets quiet, the park feels like it remembers. And when you're standing there alone, you feel that memory too. For in Wood Hill Park, in the daytime, it feels open and safe. Families sit on blankets. People play baseball. Music sometimes floats through the air. But close to midnight, that same open space feels exposed. There are fewer people, and the distance between lights feels wider than it should. I stood there remembering a case from 1986. A woman named Jennifer Levin was murdered in Central Park after spending time with a man she had met earlier that night. The case became known as the Preppy murder. It shocked New York, not just because of the crime itself, but because of who was involved and how public it became. The park once again became a symbol of danger after dark. As I walked slowly across the edge of the lawn, I kept thinking about how quickly a normal night can turn into tragedy. Jennifer had gone out like any young person in the city. No one expects their night to end inside a police investigation. The grass was slightly wet under my shoes. I could see the tall buildings glowing around the park's edges, but inside the park, the darkness felt thicker. I suddenly became very aware of how far I was from the nearest exit. That's when I heard a sharp sound behind me. It was just someone kicking a bottle accidentally near a bench. But in that split second before I understood what it was, my mind jumped somewhere else. My body froze. My heart started racing. That spike of fear felt real and physical. I kept walking, telling myself that Central Park today is statistically much safer than it was in the 70s and 80s. Crime has dropped significantly. Patrols are regular. Cameras exist. The city has changed. But standing there, knowing that real lives were lost in this exact park, safety statistics didn't fully calm me. The strange thing about Central Park at night isn't ghosts. It's awareness. You feel more alert. More exposed. Every shadow looks deeper. Every distant voice sounds closer than it is. I sat down for a moment and looked across the dark field. I tried to imagine the park decades ago, fewer lights, fewer safeguards, more uncertainty. I understood why people once feared this place after sunset. Nothing paranormal happened that night. No whispers. No shadows moving on their own. But as I walked out of the park again, I realized something unsettling. A place doesn't need spirits to feel haunted. Sometimes, real history is enough. 5 Riverside Park. By then, I had already walked through the Ramble, the Reservoir, Bethesda Terrace, and the Great Lawn after dark. But this time felt different. Maybe because the more I learned about the park's history, the heavier it started to feel. It was just after 11 p.m. when I entered from the 72nd Street side. The city was still alive behind me, taxis moving, people laughing, restaurant doors opening and closing. But a few steps inside the park, the noise faded. That sudden shift always unsettles me. I decided to walk without headphones. I wanted to hear everything. As I moved along the path, I kept thinking about how different Central Park was in the late 1970s. Back then, it wasn't unusual to read about robberies or violent assaults happening inside the park at night. The city itself was struggling with high crime, and the park reflected that reality. People genuinely avoided it after sunset. That fear was not exaggerated. It was based on repeated, documented incidents. I reached a dimly lit stretch near one of the wooded areas. The lights were spaced far apart. Between them, there were pockets of real darkness. I slowed down without realizing it. Then I heard something. A branch snapped somewhere off the path. It wasn't loud, but in that silence, it felt sharp. My mind reacted instantly. I stopped walking. For a few seconds, I couldn't see anything beyond the tree line. I thought about how many past victims probably never expected danger either. They were just walking. Just existing. A figure eventually stepped out, just a man walking his dog. He nodded at me casually and kept moving. I felt slightly embarrassed for overreacting, but my heart was still racing. That's when it hit me. The fear I was feeling wasn't imagination. It was awareness shaped by history. When you know that real attacks happened here decades ago, your senses stay on edge. You become hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow, every movement. I found a bench and sat down for a moment. The skyline looked peaceful from where I was sitting. You would never guess this park once had such a dangerous reputation. And that's what makes it unsettling. On the surface, Central Park at night looks calm. Beautiful even. But if you stand there long enough, alone, you start to feel the weight of its past. Not ghosts. Not spirits. Just the memory of real events that changed how people see this place forever. When I finally walked out, I didn't feel terrified. I felt quiet. Because sometimes the most haunting thing about a place is knowing that everything you're afraid of actually happened.